Well, welcome. So glad you guys could join us for our Wednesday night study. We are in a series right now, which is called Better Together. And we're going to be talking about things like friendships, and you probably already heard about that, and forgiveness and reconciliation and conflict resolution. But I'm excited tonight that we're going to be talking about marriage. And I have an incredible privilege of introducing my good friends, Bob and Karen Donovan. And Bob and I we kind of met sort of through my brother officially, although you guys saw me before then. And I'm guessing it was probably back around 2011 or so.
Yep.
That I think I finally picked up the phone, or I may have given an email and said, my brother told me to reach out to you,
Yep.
and let's talk about marriage.
Yeah.
And that was some time ago. And we've just become good friends. We've had the privilege of having you come and speak to our couples here. But why don't you tell us a little bit about you? I know about you, but I would love for our folks to know a little more about you.
Yeah, sure. Well, we've been married 46 and a half years, 47 in May, and it's been an amazing adventure. That's a good word to use.
Adventure,
right. Started out kind of difficult and challenging. We entered into marriage without any really realistic expectations about what to expect. I came in very emotionally immature. Karen came in with very high expectations, so it just was a recipe for, it's a challenging time for us. So I went through a lot of difficulty during that time, but you know what? God uses your pain, and He used that to fuel us to do kind of the work we do right now. So anyway, maybe you can talk a little bit more about our family and the joys of your life.
Which of course is Bob.
Which is not me.
Absolutely. Now, we have 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren, which is such a blessing. We're so blessed to have them all be in church and loving the Lord, and we get to disciple. Actually, I was just talking this Sunday to my second granddaughter about this, what does being a disciple mean? Wow. And I said, Lila, I'm so excited that I get to disciple you. And she just gave me a big hug, and I'm like, what's better than that?
Not a whole lot.
Wow. Yeah, so we're really enjoying life now, and we're very blessed to do marriage ministry for our church, and then to be with you.
Well, I've been blessed. I mean, so many times throughout the years. Really, our pre-marriage work, we started doing kind of pre-marriage stuff. We did the focus survey, and we started that back in, gosh, I want to think it was around 2000 or 2001 with BlackRock. We all got certified together, and then kind of we went our own ways again. But then over the years, just how your guys' ministry has kind of stepped in. Bob, just the mentoring that you've given me as I've worked marriage ministries here. Ironically, our camera guy who's working this right now, Jason Parker, you guys had the privilege of working with him and his wife, I believe, about 4 years ago, because we sent our couples to you for a bit. So tell us a little bit. You're in marriage ministry over at BlackRock. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you both over there.
Yeah, sure. That actually is one of the joys of our life right now, is be able to serve together in this ministry. We, if you can believe it, I do track couples, and we have hit, I think, 205 couples this past class. Wow. So over the last 15 years, we've had 205 couples go through our workshop. And it's been a real thrill to pour into these couples. I mean, honestly, you don't get couples with a more tender heart, and a more willingness and openness to learn about marriage. So, I mean, it just fuels us, because you get these couples come into your life, and they're like, tell us about everything you know about marriage. So
for sure, it's like the best part of our ministry, because we feel like we're getting them started. We're giving them a foundation. We're bringing up all kinds of things that can be helpful for them in the future, and they're listening, and they want to know, because this is the perfect time for them to jump in. So it's exciting, and it's fun, and
a lot of them come in thinking, we're in this position at BlackRock, and we've been married 46 years, and we're the marriage gurus, right? That's what they think. But so they come in thinking that they're going to get advice, and we give them that, because we've learned a lot. However, most of what they learn is from things that we didn't do early in our marriage.
Yeah.
So just being that
We just
transparent
share
with
a
these
lot of our
couples.
mistakes. We share a lot of our mistakes and our foibles and all the things that we had to learn and grow through. So they really appreciate our openness and genuineness, and then that helps them to be open with us, and it sets the tone for a really great class.
It's funny, that reminds me of a quote. I think it's by E. Charles Stanley. It says, "What is it to try and live the Christian life implies and leads to certain failure. To train to live the Christian life puts even failures to great success."
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds like that's it.
Yeah.
What is pre-marriage ministry look like for you? What does it look like for you? Are they in a classroom? Are they at your house? What does it look like?
Well, now it's wonderful. We have it at our house. We have a small amount of couples. The last time we had 4 or 5 couples sitting around our living room. We go through an 8-week process, 2 hours a week, and it's a little booklet we use. We have a very uh, pointed schedule that we
Mhm.
follow, and it's great because it's an intimate setting. You know, we've in the past years, we've had up to 11, 12 couples at a time when we had to meet at the church, and we had this big group, and we had to divide into smaller groups, and it was great. It worked. We got all the material out, but it wasn't as intimate as now it's been these last few years, and we just love that.
You know, the other huge thing that we get to see is God's work on display. Like we never know what that's going
Right.
to look like. Never. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just give you an example from this last class. We had 4 couples. One was this older couple, not married. She was divorced, and they're both in the military.
Okay.
Now he had 2 deployments in
In Iraq.
the Mideast, Iraq, right? So he comes in, this career military guy, tough guy, private guy, very close, like he's in this class, right? He walks in the door and he looks at me and he says, "Were you in the military?" Like he wanted to know right away, like, should I listen to you?
Right.
The crazy part is part of our ministry is
Right.
right now, you know, we want to build up other couples to come
Yeah.
after us, right? So we had this couple with us that we were training on how to do the class. They were both ex-military. First time they'd been in our class, both ex-military. So you can imagine, like every
Yeah.
time they say something, this guy's ears would perk up.
Yeah.
You know, are you kidding me? Like now of all times,
Yeah.
this guy and this couple in the same class. So we get to see God work incredibly well.
Mhm.
I love, I think I've had 5 or 6 couples that I've sent to you guys for pre-marriage, and it's so much fun for me to track with them where they're at, right now. And I've got one couple right now. They broke my heart, but you have to follow God, and it was very evident that God was sending them to North Carolina. But Kiana and Martin, and watching how the class for you not only gave them a foundation which they desperately needed and didn't know, but now they do marriage ministry themselves,
It's
and it's just
remarkable.
fantastic. So ironically, they actually still join with us. So they're in North Carolina, but they're still a part of our, some of our life groups. When they dedicated their first kid, they drove all the way up from North Carolina. But whenever
Wow.
we talk, they still talk about the experience they
Wow.
had
Wow.
going through pre-marriage class with you guys. And
Wow.
so it's exciting to
Yeah.
see
That's
how the
nice.
Holy Spirit has used you,
Yeah.
but also how you guys have really inspired us. And I remember when you were here in 2016 and you spoke, and the transparency of your message, the struggles you went through were just, it was incredible. But one of the things that stuck with me, and we just talked about this again recently, was that you guys have kind of a theme scripture. If there was a theme scripture that you two live by, which really will set the course for the remainder of this night, what would it be, and what does it mean to you both?
Yeah. So it's Romans 12:10, and it really is something that just came to us years ago, and it kind of underpins kind of who we are, what we try to become. So it's really it's outdo one another in showing honor, and that's really what it says. And not to do this big study of it, but I love it because it really looks at who can be better at honoring one another and what they need to feel loved and
Yeah.
valued. So Yeah, it's been great to, we talk about having New Year's resolutions. That's really every year just kind of the bedrock of who we want to be as a couple.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder for me when I'm not feeling so much wanting to honor Bob, and I can say to myself,
Which I'm sure that's very rare.
You've been good today, right? I've been good today, right?
Today was a pretty good day.
Okay.
No, and I'll just say, is this honoring what I'm thinking right now? Is this honoring? How can I do something that will bless him rather than go down this rabbit trail of thoughts? So it draws me back, and it's, Scripture is always alive and active, and so it's so helpful.
So if you really got us to dig into this, Karen's going to come at this pretty deep theologically, and really, I come at it sweeping out the garage.
Yeah.
Sweeping out the garage, because Karen's love language is acts of service.
Yeah.
And when she looks at our garage,
Yeah.
she sees the 6 leaves that are in the garage,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
she'll ask me to sweep out the garage,
Right.
and can I do it and
Yeah.
honor her without
Yep.
complaining? Can I do that, right?
Yep.
So it's very practical for me. It is.
You guys realize my wife is going to listen to this, and now I'm going to have to go sweep the garage out, right?
And you'll do it joyfully, right?
Well, yeah. I wish it was just sweeping. That would be easy. Actually, I spent a long time this past winter on the garage. But what's exciting to me, one of the things that that's exciting for me is just how engaged you guys are. Obviously, with the pre-marriage, which is the bedrock, that became how we met. But that is far from everything that you're doing. And I'm also honored that you guys would take time out to meet with us, because I know this weekend.
Yeah.
You guys are leading a marriage retreat. How many couples are going to be there?
Yeah, so that actually is something different. We do a marriage retreat coming up in April. This is actually called the family retreat.
The family retreat, right?
Family
right.
retreat up at Lake Spofford, Camp Spofford. 120 people are coming. COVID hasn't circumvented this at all, but they've asked us to speak on Saturday night on a message on marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So Karen and I sat back and about a month ago started praying and thinking about this, and we said, let's try to think about something that represents our marriage lessons of 46 years, as well as kind of our ministry experience of 15 years. So, and you can't do a 10-point plan, right? You got to land on something. So we've come up with just kind of 4 basic principles that we really have seen in our life and in our ministry. So, right, and that's Saturday night. So this is kind of like.
So here you are. You're getting ready for this big weekend thing, and you're spending time with us, and I'm really grateful. When we were having a conversation, listening to where you're intending to go, I'm like sitting here going, man, I wish I was going to be up there for you this weekend. But that being said, let's launch into it, because I'd love for our folks, because they're not going to be able to join you for that weekend, but really hear what God has put on your heart for this season and sharing. And I know that we talked about the first point that you're going to be talking about is this idea of what it means to be on the same team. I mean, that sounds a little bit like where Romans 12:10 would come in. Like, you can't be on the same team without honoring each other. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what is the genesis of that point and what it means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the term being on the same team really comes from Kingdom Life, because we were here at one of your marriage weeks. I can't remember what year it was, but beautiful couple that had got up and spoke, gave just a short little testimony, but throughout the thing, they said if they were arguing or if they were escalating a disagreement, they would look at each other and fist bump, same team. And that just struck us. And so really talking about being on the same team is really talking about becoming one. And that's a really important point for us. We talk about that in our pre-marriage class, but really whenever we get together with couples and talk about oneness in your marriage, and that to remember that you are on the same team. So if you're trying to win and beat the other person, well, nobody's going to win because you're on the same team.
And this, I mean, it's biblical, right? I mean, it's in Genesis chapter 2, Mark writes about it, Matthew records it, and it's in Ephesians. So, when something's in the Bible 4 times, you should pay attention.
It might be,
you should pay attention, right?
Yeah.
So it is biblical. And I would just say that over the years, again, 46 years, um, again, we haven't always been on the same team, to be completely honest.
Mhm.
We early on, like in money, like I I have a minor in finance. I just have a budgeting experience. I'm just more gifted in that area.
Yeah.
So early on, I would just handle all the money, and uh, Karen really came in, just let Bob do it, let Bob do it. So I did. Now, having done that, I just would kind of just make decisions without involving my wife. I mean, you can talk more. You
Yeah,
never
yeah,
felt you had it really a voice.
yeah.
So we
And
really,
right.
with our money, we really weren't making decisions together. We weren't on the same team. That's one example of
Yeah, yeah.
how we were,
And
we're not.
a big hot point for me was housekeeping, because especially early in our marriage, before we had kids, we were both working full time, but that was all falling to me. So we weren't good communicators. So we weren't communicating about how to be a team on anything. So what I love is that God kind of redeems this, not only in our own life, but I get to see my daughters and sons-in-law really being a team, handling their household, working
Mhm.
together on how they're going to do meals and bring the kids to school or pick them up from daycare or those kind of things. And those are the practical things that are so important about becoming a
Yeah,
team.
yeah. I tell you, one really practical, important part of that, I think, is growing your faith together as a
Mhm,
team.
Yeah.
mhm.
That's really important. Now, that doesn't mean sameness, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean. I mean, we are really different on how we grow. Karen's involved with community Bible school, um, study, and she's very active, very involved. Spends a lot of time studying scripture. I'm more of applied scripture guy. I'm more like out doing and showing on. Like, what's that mean? What's that look like? So we're different on how we grow, but we
Yeah.
have the same passion and desire to grow.
Yeah.
That's our teamness coming out,
Yeah.
and also the way that we share that. One thing we do share, the funny thing is we've tried devotionals, Mike, and they haven't worked, right? How many devotionals we
I
tried?
know, I
We've
know. We
never
get
ever
like halfway
found.
through the book and then we're like, oh, this isn't
Yeah.
working.
For us, it just doesn't
Uh,
work. We don't grow that way, but
Yeah.
we do grow separately.
Yeah.
But where we do grow, we come together and we talk about.
mm,
Karen talks about how she's learning and how important that is to her, and I talk about what God's showing me and
mhm.
how He's speaking to me and living life out. So that's important on teamness and growing together.
Yeah.
Even though, again, it's different,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Couples think they have to, you know, do the same thing. They have to both study. They both have to have the same prayer ability, right? And
Yeah.
you don't. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
your desire should be united. That should
Yeah.
be
Mhm.
united.
Mhm.
Well, it's funny because when I talk about that subject in a different context, I talk about the difference between unity and uniformity, right?
Mhm.
And if we're expecting uniformity, it's never going to work because somebody's going to have to give up a personality or desires, whatever. But what God does in a healthy relationship is He brings two together in unity,
Mhm.
meaning they have their separate gifts and their separate talents and their separate likes and dislikes and all, but they're used to support one another
Right.
for the same goals.
Right.
Is what I hear. Well,
Exactly.
I would love for just a moment to sit on this topic because you actually, we hadn't talked about this, but you actually identified one of the challenges that I have, especially in pre-marriage, and I'm talking with couples, and we talk about the idea of finances, right? It's the idea of unity and finance being on the same team. If you were to just take just a minute or two and say, in relation to this whole concept of finances, what would you recommend to a couple in how to, if you were on the different page, you handled all the finances, she didn't. What was the resolution? How did you guys work to get on the same page, same team with finances?
Yeah. So great question. It's a deeper dive. This could be a whole topic on that,
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the big thing was finally just Karen being able to communicate. She didn't feel involved.
Yeah.
That's one. I mean, it kind of came out with I loved vacations, family vacations, and I would just like we didn't make a lot of money back then, so I just arbitrarily decided I just think vacations are more important than taking care of the house and doing house repairs. in the long run, that's what I felt. Karen, you
Yeah.
didn't feel like she had a say in that.
Right.
So
So
finally,
it was really a big part of it was being able to communicate our needs to one another,
Mhm.
what's important to us. So when we finally started to do that, when I said it makes me feel um, honored to be able to do this one thing in the house and then maybe do a vacation at another point in time or whatever, just to be able to verbalize
right.
what was important to each of us and how we would then each feel honored in
Mhm.
that situation.
Right.
So,
So what I do now, I mean, everything we have, even though I still do everything, but I show Karen where we spend the money. We basically charge everything and pay it all off, right?
Yep.
So I go through that and see charges and we talk about it.
yeah.
So, some couples need, in our pre-marriage, we talk about maybe setting aside a budget night,
Yeah.
like last month, whatever, last Friday of the month, talk about budget. Like some couples can do that. For us, it's more ongoing conversations involving
Yep.
Mhm.
you. Make sure you're involved. Ask her, like, you feel involved, and am I communicating, like, and how much you want to know.
Mhm.
The other thing with us, because we're older, so we're on fixed income
Yeah.
stage now, so it becomes vitally important. Our money now,
Yeah.
this is it. Like,
Yeah.
this is it. It's like,
Yeah.
so we make decisions on investments that are critical for
Yeah.
where we are in life. So
Mhm.
we have a planner we sit down with. Again, I give Karen the option, do you want to come with me or not? So it's a lot of just
Yeah.
Yeah.
intentionality
Mhm.
about making
Yeah.
sure that you feel involved.
Right.
Well,
Agreed.
what an interesting word you would use right there, intentionality, right? Because I would love to, if I was to take it what I'm hearing, I think the biggest key to being on the same page, what I hear is communication. I think I think we all know that when we're dealing with couples, communication is so important. Communication versus in every category of marriage, right?
Right.
And so I love that. But communication takes intentionality, and I know that the second thing that we were talking about for you guys is what it means to live an intentional marriage. Bob, what
Right.
does that mean?
Yeah. So I read a book by Scott Stanley years ago, and he coined the phrase, and I just love it, and I talk about it a lot, called "Decide, Don't Slide." Decide and don't slide. And basically, it is about being intentional.
Mhm.
I mean, just an example. Just recently, we're involved with something in my wife's family that I'm handling, and one option is very complicated. Is that we just stay the course and we don't make a decision. That's a decision,
Right.
right? You just keep doing what you're doing, right? So, deciding, not sliding, basically is about being intentional about decisions. Another thing that has helped us over the years, and I'd say, we've made some mistakes, but one thing we've done pretty well is we've been intentional about investing in our marriage.
Yeah.
About even when we had 3 kids under the age of 4,
Mhm.
very difficult. I mean, it was a really challenging time.
Mhm.
And even just going out for pizza, and you can talk about this because you were
Yeah.
home with these 3 maniacs. So, just going out for
I'm
pizza.
sure your kids
They
hearing
better not be
that are
listening
going to
to this.
love
I'm
to hear
sorry.
that we're
Can
called
you
maniacs.
take that out, maniacs? I love my kids. Love my kids.
Well, they have kids of their own, so they know what it's
Yeah,
like.
that's right.
They'll
They
give
know
you
what
grace
that
for that.
means.
Like,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
But just so we always took time, even back then,
Yeah.
to just go out for pizza and talk. That
Yeah.
1 hour out at John's
Mhm.
Pizza was just like a lifeblood to get out.
Yeah. So
And
important.
the other thing too, it is really important that it looks, living an intentional marriage looks different in different life stages.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
so whether you're newly married and you have all the time in the world, like, it's kind of easy to just pump the brakes on your relationship and not do as much. With small kids, it's really easy to just get caught up in just you're exhausted and it's too hard to go out.
Mhm.
Where we are right now, like we've been empty nests for years. It's kind of easy just to slide, right? And just to kind of drift. There's a term called relational drift, which we really just not investing, you just go
Mhm.
through the day. So living an intentional marriage looks different in different life stages.
Yeah.
I will add that. There's no one way to do
Yeah.
that.
But in all of them, if you're not intentionally trying to move together, you're drifting apart in
Yeah.
every single stage. Yeah.
That's an excellent visual. So even simple things, we feel very connected. Sometimes we'll just go to a coffee shop, like just change the venue
Yeah.
and have a cup of coffee together and talk.
A lot of times we would go for walks, especially when the kids were younger, but they could be in the house by themselves for a little bit. And we'd go for a walk in the afternoon. You know, we weren't far
Yeah.
from the house, but they were fine and we were off. And when we are out walking, it's like it's just the environment for talking. We can really communicate.
It
So
does,
that was a huge one, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
So intentionality in different stages is really important. So if you were to kind of like like you hit an interesting point, right? Which you said that point when your kids could be left home by themselves and you go out, right? That's the stage that Gene and I are at right now. You know, our kids are they're old enough that we can leave we don't have to pay for a babysitter anymore. Like Hannah gets paid to babysit.
Right,
This is
right.
a lovely stage. And but there was that stage where we didn't have it. So if you were to kind of say from the early stage, let's start from the early stage. If there was that time during the parenting moments where you couldn't really leave your kids without a babysitter, if you can recall, what's one thing that you remember intentionally? If you were to say, here was one thing we did intentionally in that stage that you remember.
I do remember, and they were really little, like babies, so they were, pretty much in bed by 7:30, right? We could get takeout and we could just watch something on TV. And, I remember one time having like a little picnic on the living room floor with our takeout and watching a movie. And to me, like that was heaven because finally we got to do just something together and they were asleep and this was our space. So,
Okay, so something simple like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
very simple.
Yeah, that's why it depends, right?
Yeah.
See, how much effort did that take?
Yeah.
Right? It didn't take much, but it was just intentional about just having that
Yeah.
moment together. So it does look differently.
So for Gina, it's funny you would say that because for Gina and I, it was downstairs date night. That's what we called it, downstairs date night. And the kids knew you're going to bed. Mommy and Daddy are getting Coromandel Indian food, and we're going to set up the table in front of the wood stove, and we're going to have, so that's good. So intentionality, from if I was to look at this, is a big one. Is intentional time, taking time, whether it's an hour on a regular basis, really kind of going back to the same team, intentionality in conversations around finances, intentionality around parenting,
Yep.
And again, we could go back and spin this off into a parenting thing.
Right.
But in living an intentional marriage means you have a goal in mind.
Right.
And you're taking steps towards it. All right, fantastic. So then,
let me add two things. One of
Sure.
which, and this is like if I can speak to the men for a moment. So one thing we've seen with a lot of couples, especially younger ones, is passive husbands, and not that they have to do everything, but just to speak to the men, I would just say if you could if you're not that involved right now, just step up and just plan a date night. Whether it's saying that first Friday of the month is our marriage night and we're going to go out for pizza. I mean, just something simple, but I just seen passive men. God didn't design men to be passive. And again, not that they have to do everything,
right.
But I would just say if there's a guy out there that's kind of sitting back and got the remote control and letting his wife plan everything, you just might, again, I'd encourage you, just step up just a little bit and take some initiative on planning. That's all.
Yeah. Leadership and love. I think it's interesting. A lot of guys, they demand to lead the home, which basically means you all follow me in what I want to do, but leadership and love says, let me take the first step to demonstrate love. And that's an intentional, well, we could spend just on that one alone, right? Holy cow. Talk about Ephesians chapter 5. What does that really mean? Maybe we could have done that too.
Yeah.
But that does take us to kind of this mindset, right? To do that requires a mindset. And I think that a lot of times we get stuck because we're really self-centered in relationships. So what's a mindset shift that you could recommend?
So we talk a lot about having a 50-50 marriage, which you'll hear in the world. Sure, we should have a 50-50 marriage and we'll get along great. But, what does that really mean?
Mhm.
I'll only give 50%, and I'm going to tell you this is how much 50% is. And so it's very subjective, and it's really I don't know, I don't even know what the word is. It's self-run, it's self-involved, and what we talk about is having a hundred marriage. So not worrying about the other person, but giving 100% of yourself. And so you really need to be selfless in order to have that kind of a
Mm.
mindset. And this is played out all throughout our marriage. There were times when both of us could not really give 100%. When my mom was ill, had Alzheimer's, and I was doing a lot of the managing of her care and everything, I just knew I was not going to be there. It was not emotionally, I couldn't give that 100%, but Bob was always trying to step up, and
Mm.
vice versa. When he would be just bogged down with work and in ministry and everything, and it in that season, my
Yeah.
mindset had to go to not, oh, all right, I got to muster up 100% and I'm going to trudge up this hill. It was more, all right, Lord, I need more of you. I want all that you
Mm.
have for me so that then I can pour out what my 100% will look like. And we can't do it on our own. We can't have that 100 mindset ourselves unless we're being filled up by God. So, any of those things, we really need to be looking to the Lord to fill us.
Yeah.
It's so funny that, again, we've done our pre-marriage class for 15 years, and again, 200 couples. This is the one thing we hear over and over, takeaways, because I love, like,
Yeah.
impact. I love, you mentioned earlier about just people remembering our talk. I love that, because that it has some impact, right? This is the one thing, like when we meet couples for, 4 or 5 years later,
Yeah.
and I will ask them, I said, what do you remember about our class? Like, what's helped you, right?
100%.
This is the
one.
one. I mean, we hear this over and over again, that
Mhm.
couples have heard this, that when we talked about, striving to give your 100,
Yeah.
right? Not being able to, but striving to give your 100. So, it's one of these takeaways that we've heard from
Yeah.
these young couples.
I mean, it really takes you right back to your theme scripture, right? Outdo one another in
Right.
love. Don't
Yeah.
treat one another with love.
Yeah.
Outdo one another.
Yeah.
Work. The interesting thing about this one for me, because this is one that I resonate with a lot, and it's the understanding the difference between the covenant of marriage
Mhm.
and a marriage contract.
Right.
Right.
Right. And I think in a marriage
Right.
contract, that's kind of like, okay, we're both coming into this as equal partners. And as long as you hold up your end of the bargain, I'll hold up my end of the bargain, and everything's going to be wonderful.
Right.
Mhm.
But the covenant says, I'm making a covenant. And even if you don't hold up, I'm going to hold up. And the reason is because of my love for you. And how challenging is that, though?
Yeah.
And,
Very.
what is well, let me back up, because I think I was going to ask a question. I think partly you answered. Let me amplify. Is the reality is we can't do it in our
Right.
own.
Right. Yeah.
Is there a moment that you guys can think of where this was? You talked some time about your mom when you're
Mhm.
dealing with her Alzheimer's and going through. What was the process? What was the communication process about that?
Mhm.
Was it a communication process that you had together, or was it a communication you just had to have with the Lord? How did you handle this moment of going, I can't give?
Yeah.
Because I imagine somebody, well, I imagine me. I mean, if I can't give my 100%, but I know I should be giving my 100%, it's embarrassing. I don't want to admit that I can't
Yeah.
give. What do you do with that person who's striving so hard to hit that 100%, but they can't? What do you tell that person? What do you tell that couple?
Yeah. Yeah. I like this because it just it drives me to the Lord. We actually did communicate about, you know, I'm not only am I not at my best, I'm kind of depleted, and I'm sorry. I can't I, I'm not going to be all in this. I want to be, but I can't. And then praying together, and then seeking God myself.
Mhm.
So that really was how that played out for us. But it really it made me so aware of how much I need to go to God to fill me up
Yeah.
so that I can even just maintain, and then even in that point to pray for Bob so
Yeah.
that God would be filling him so that he would be able to hang in there with me, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where this is all like this is a supernatural
Mm,
moment, and so many guys they want to be the Tom Brady's of the world, and they want to have the ball with 2 minutes to go, and right they want to be in that
Yep.
position, and just because of how we both are dedicated to growing, Karen responded in that moment the way she did, and I might add a relentless worker. I mean, Karen's work ethic is uh, really high. So for my wife to kind of come to me and say, I'm not going to be at my best, those are the words she used. Like that kind of stunned me because that's not how
Yeah.
Karen operates. She's always, a lot of times, she's at her best. So that hit me. Okay, and the second thing was, like, okay, like, am I up for this? Like,
Yeah.
and this is not this
Yeah.
week. This is not going to be like I'm not
Yeah.
going to be at my best for this week. Like,
This
is
was
the
a
long
season
haul.
of life.
yeah,
It's a long
yeah.
haul. Like she
Yeah.
went through just a brutal 7-8 years of this. So
Wow.
yeah. So this was not like, get up
Yeah.
for this week or
Yeah.
even month. Like
Yeah.
it's like we're gonna be in this for a little bit.
Yeah.
And am I ready for that? Am I ready to kind of just, again, not just that you mentioned earlier, just grudgingly just suck it up and do it? No. Again, am I am I joyfully ready to respond
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
do my part? Because during this time.
You know what else is really important in a situation like that is to have community and have
I was
support.
just going to ask this. Yeah.
Yeah, really. I mean, and we did. We had good community. We had a great church that supported us. So that's vital. That's really vital.
So in that process, then what I'm hearing is not only you having to be vulnerable with your husband to say, I can't give you what you need from me, but you now have to be vulnerable with a community and welcome a community
Mhm.
into establishing it. I mean, how hard was that?
Mm.
Was that a challenge for you, or did you feel some people that's a challenge, like the thought of, wait a minute, opening up my marriage and letting them know that we can't do this? What did that look like?
I mean, I think it really was a blessing,
Yeah.
to be able to talk to people and say, just be open and like, we're having a real hard time. This is rough, and just to be to know that there were people there that would want to pray for me, or I just had, you just sometimes can pick out one or two people that you can share something with, and they're going to pray for you. They're there for you. I'm an introvert, so I don't need to like have a huge crowd. But if I know one or two people I can talk to and are praying for me, then that's such a blessing.
So if I were to take this then and kind of continue going back to the top and working our way through, I mean, there's the idea of the communication of saying, hey, listen, I can't be first string right now. I need some help. So that's to stay on the same team. But then the intentionality, I mean, before you can have the intentionality of bringing community in, there's the intentionality of being in community to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I'm hearing is this has never been, your marriage has never been about just the two of you, or maybe it wasn't
It was early.
successfully
Yeah, it was
about the
early.
two of you,
Yeah.
but community, it was part of your intentionality. It wasn't just
Yes.
intentionality about talking about finances, wasn't intentionality about talking about intimacy, but also intentionally of building community around each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds like
it was vital. I know, again, Karen's a very strong individual, but I know that I just remember going to church on some Sundays, and you just, after service, they have people in front to pray, and you just said, I have to go up for prayer,
Mhm.
and like you just went up and received,
Mhm.
so it just was, I thought it was a tender moment
Yeah.
for you to
Mm.
just go and receive
Mhm.
support and prayer and
Yeah.
counsel from key people at
Sure.
church. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that now that you mentioned that too, um, community is really what supports marriages, and it has really supported our marriage. And from day one, when we first came to the Lord and realized, He was going to save our marriage, and He was in this with us, and we just jumped into community like right away, and never looked back. And obviously we've grown through different seasons, and we've grown in our marriage, but we've always grown in community with that, and that's vital.
Awesome. So when we look at building community, right, we could look at building community, and you got your bridge club, you got your golfing buddies or whatever, but community that you guys are talking about is specific. What I hear is the community, it's more than even just people in your church, it's people who have that same covenant with God mindset as you're going through this. And so when you get around people like that, it helps change you, right? And that's, you can be a change for others. And it kind of leads to this last piece of, I remember so funny story, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was teaching the marriage classes before I even met my wife, right? Like, here's this confirmed bachelor hoping to be married one day. I was a pastor for 9 years before I got married. But I remember I had a class that I taught, which was called Finding and Feeding a Vision for Your Marriage, right? And I've looked back at those notes and I kind of laugh now as I look at them, go, oh yeah, I was definitely single when I taught this, right? But there's something about that principle that remains the same. And so for you guys, this has been another key point for your marriage ministry, but also that you're going to be sharing this weekend.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what that means for you.
Yeah. So I think, and it's really funny that this last point, it just resonated with me recently. This is not something that, sometimes just something comes to you, right? And this here just came to me, and I'll unpack a little bit, but it's finding God's will for your marriage together. And I'll say this, that it's so much bigger than marriage. Like, marriage is so much bigger than marriage, right? That if you're focused on, this sounds crazy, right? It's a marriage podcast, but if you're focusing on just your marriage, you're going to be disappointed. Like, as great as my wife is, I mean, she's just not going to meet my expectations. And so if I make marriage my ultimate obsession and satisfaction level, it's not going to work, right? It's really just finding Jesus and putting Jesus at your center of your life, not your wife or your husband. So in a broader context, that's kind of what I mean, is that what's God's will is to really make Him your obsession, not your spouse or even your marriage. Okay, that's kind of the first layer. But the layer I want to get to is, I'm glad you mentioned covenant, right? Because there's this amazing sacred covenant, right? It's special. Like, it's so funny. Even our atheist person we know close to us said when he got married, there was just something special about it. He didn't use the word covenant, but that's kind of what he meant. Yeah. Right. And when you're in this covenant relationship, God calls each couple to do something together, to serve Him in a very unique and specific way that only that couple can do. Okay, and it's not necessarily what we do. Okay, like, it's not serving in marriage ministry. That's definitely not what I'm talking about. It could be, right? It could be leading a small group. It could be serving an elderly neighbor, right? It could be just something small, right? But the key is that it's a high calling, and I hope I'm elaborating and communicating correctly. It's a deep and profound, unique calling that God calls each couple to do that only they can do. Yeah. And I would just, maybe something to maybe think about, but I'd love to have couples just have that conversation. What might that be? What might that look like that only you can do? And it's not working for a church, right? It's not working for a church.
No, trust me.
Right? It's actually bigger than that, because you can reach people that we can't.
Yeah.
But it's a unique, special
I mean,
calling on
just
each of us.
speaking spiritually, it's really like reflecting Jesus to the world in your marriage, the way
Mm,
you are together, the way you walk together, the way you are sitting in a restaurant together talking and then communicating with the server. It's the way you are out in public and the way you are with other people. So that, and who knows where that goes,
mhm.
but
Right,
that's really what how
right,
you're using your marriage to
right,
reflect Jesus,
right,
and
right.
just being aware of that. And then, that could take you anywhere. That could take you to the mission field. That can take you to marriage ministry. That could take you to, right, just being a
To your
neighborhood,
neighbor, yeah.
you know.
That's where I think we get kind of lost sometimes because
Yeah.
we talk, and we hear this a lot. And first thing people talk about is going to some country to be a missionary. And again, if God calls people to that,
Yeah.
that's awesome. But that's not what we mean.
Yeah.
Like I think for the most part, we mean people that you can be in your neighborhood and be that gospel to your neighbor together.
Yeah.
The key is
Together.
together. And one thing we've seen a lot is one husband or wife on fire in one area, whether it's with going on a short-term mission trip or serving in church together, and I love it. But the other one kind of comes along. I don't mean that. That's exactly what I mean. Like to sit down and really prayerfully think about where the Holy Spirit's leading you both together.
Yeah.
What might that be? And again, I would prefer like not in a church someplace. Like
Yeah.
maybe if it's serving, great, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
I think it's something
Yeah.
different.
What I love is something you said, right? And I tried to get it word for word, but it was, the highest calling is reflecting. How do you as a couple reflect Jesus to the world? And I think that's important because it takes me back to Colossians 3:16. Whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to Him. And my dad used to say, because it was not about a matter of rules. Well, you can't do this and you can't do that, which is ironic. That this is one of the things that I remember about my dad. But it was the Colossians test. If you can do it with Jesus sitting next to you and know that He would be pleased with it, then you can do it. So that's kind of becomes this thing. And so this idea, as I'm listening to you, is not necessarily so much the vocational calling of the couple as much as it's the relational and reflective calling as a couple, is what I hear you saying. How is it we as a couple are best going to reflect
Exactly.
God's love to those around us?
Right.
That's
Right.
really amazing.
Right.
So let me ask you this question, because I think within that, you're going to find some that will have very specific giftings. I think a very specific thing is marriage ministry. That's something that you guys are called to, but it comes out of who you are as a couple, not
Right.
something that you script out and have planned for, right?
Right.
So I hear that as a beautiful reflection, even while you do community Bible school and you do all the different various boards and everything that you're on, right? There's still this commonality.
Yeah.
Let me go back though and ask, how many couples, so let's do a little bit of a rapid fire question on this. How many couples in pre-marriage come to you and they know what their calling is as a couple?
Oh, rare. Rare.
Do you ever have any couples that think that they do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's say, well, here's what we've seen. And you can wait. Like I've seen individuals come with a passion to, again, be in a missionary field or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? We've seen that, like one or the other.
Right.
But couples,
Yeah.
not many, like very rare.
So you would then teach it more as this is an aspiration, and this is part of the intentionality of goal setting, is that you come to this conclusion. All right. How often, at what point do you think couples, if you were to look at some couples and say, in our 215 couples that we've mentored over these years, or the couples that we've counseled with, because let's face it, you guys do more than just mentor pre-marriage. I know you work with couples that are struggling, so there's so much more that you do. What is the key factors for couples that you've seen that have hey, we figured out this is what God's called us to do? Is there a commonality that you see with those couples, and maybe even if you had a story or something?
I do. If you have anything in mind.
Ahead.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's it typically comes out of some struggle. Okay. So it's not it's not typically something they find together, although they may,
Yeah.
they may. But typically, we've seen couples when they come out of some challenge, some significant life challenge, whether it's a mom with Alzheimer's or dealing with illness,
Yeah.
or whether it's their own infidelity or something. Like I think we've seen couples like really land on something together and understand their true calling when they've gone through something together. Like
Yeah.
that's when I think they
Yeah.
connect and they find what
Yeah.
God they talk about God's will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So I think that, what do you say to that couple that's out there that they hear this now? They've been married 17 and a half years. They love one another, but they've never really even given this a thought. What's the best advice you would give them for kind of getting to this stage of going, hey, wait a minute, what are we called to? I'll let either one of you kick in on it.
So I mean, so I would, number one is be very intentional about the conversation, right? Like I would really, I'd love to have that couple, if they're out there, to really sit down together and be very intentional about asking that question
Yeah.
with each other, right? And just talking about that.
Mhm.
And I'd also kind of add to really, again, talk about like what have they been through?
Yeah.
What struggles, what trials, like what's their giftedness? What's God designed them individually? Like almost like, again, this isn't like one night.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
This could be a weekend away. This could be a series of discussion over the
Yeah.
course of a month, right?
Yeah.
But I would look at that. I would say be very intentional about answering that question. I'd be very clear about having them talk about their struggles and trials,
Mhm.
Mhm.
what they've learned from that, how they feel God's wired in each of them,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then what's that look like if that came together?
yeah,
I think this is a massively exciting topic. If a couple was kind of courageous enough to take it on,
Mhm.
again, it's not going to come out in one or two conversations, but man, I'd love to have them that intentional conversations and see what God does with that. And obviously praying for His guidance and
Yeah.
revealing His will on this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Well, I would think about have the conversation about how have we forgiven each other? How have we worked to love each other better? And do we see other couples that we kind of know who might have a struggle or an issue that we can relate to, that we've gone through, that we've had to ask or give forgiveness for? Can we start a conversation with them and maybe see where that goes? Because I think it might be that sometimes we're called just to minister couple to couple,
Yeah.
and that could be.
Well, I love that because, for me, we're kind of getting to this. Can you believe we're already getting to a wrap up here? But what I think is important about that too is I think that we have two problems so often in couples. I'm doing marriage counseling, right? We have the couples that have everything with community and nothing with each other,
Yeah.
and then you have others that are
Right.
so together with each other but
Right.
nothing with anyone else. So there's
Right.
no balance. And when I'm dealing with pre-marriage, I know we've talked about this when we ask a pre-marriage couple, well, who knows best about whether this is the person for you? And they'll always say, well, of course we do, because we love each other. And the reality is, it's usually not us, because we're blind, right?
Right.
Love is blind, right?
Yeah.
It's the community of those around us that help us reflect. And I love that you brought that out, because I think for me, that's a key piece, because sometimes when I'm feeling low about something, it's amazing how a voice outside can come and go, wait a minute, let me tell you the way we see things, right?
Mhm.
So, man, the intentionality of building community cannot be dismissed at all. I think this is a piece that comes up through every one of these things. But the idea of, if I were to take this and hear you, what I think I hear you saying about this point, about finding God's will, is it's not just a vocational, but it's how is God calling you to reflect His love to others, and He'll do it through natural bent as you as a couple.
Yeah.
I would look at this and say, so often I think some couples struggle to answer this question, but if they just look back at what they've been through
Right.
and how they succeeded through it, that becomes the biggest point of what the ministry God's called them to.
I am 100% convinced that if they,
Yep.
again, if they're intentional about this conversation, about this topic, that God will reveal that
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah.
Because typically that's where
Yeah.
He uses us.
So we have just a few moments left, and we've had a great audience out there. And so we've got folks that are married, short time, long time. We have some that have been married and are no longer married for whatever the reasons. Then we have some that are hoping to be married one day. If you were to reflect on anything that we've talked about and say, man, here's a word of encouragement or a word of hope for you that we want you to know what God is saying to you, what would it be for you two? And I'll let either one of you go first.
Well, I would just say that, whether we're married or not, each of us are complete in Jesus. And so we should grow in that, grow in our relationship with Him, and reflect Him to the world. And whether we are married or never married, that will still accomplish, expanding the kingdom.
Awesome. Bob?
That's great. Yeah, that was really great.
He's like, you stole my line.
No, Ken, I couldn't possibly compete with my wife's eloquent way of speaking. I would just say, and I really mean this, it sounds kind of simple, but healthy people make healthy relationships. And I really mean that. Again, whichever stage you're at, when I say healthy people, just pursuing the Lord, understanding the Word, living His Word, not believing the lies of this world, but believing God's truths, which leads to making healthy decisions in your life, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, and everything you do. And whatever relationships you're in, we have a relational God that created us, whether He created us for community in your church or your neighborhood or in marriage. But it's really that, Mike. It's really, healthy people make healthy relationships.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad you could join with us tonight. And I'm grateful that you guys would take some time to share with us. I mean, there's so many things I've been writing notes as we've gone along here. And it's like just to recap everything would be amazing. But I mean, the idea of remembering if we're going to have healthy marriages, I think there are 4 points where you learn how to be on the same team. Live intentionally. How is it that we are going to reflect God to one another? What are the goals that we're going to live towards? That covenantal 100% mindset. I'm not in it for me, I'm in it for you, and God will assist me whenever you're weak. And then finding God's will for your marriage together. I mean, these are 4 powerful points. And just like Bob said, healthy people make healthy relationships, and that can sound a little daunting to some people because you're questioning how healthy you are. And the beautiful thing about it is that healthy people are not perfect people. They're people who perfectly seek after God. And in that, I love, if you've hung around with me for any time, you've heard me talk about Psalm 37, 23 and 24. The steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Though he stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord will uphold him. And I think that's the important thing, is recognizing a righteous person is one who says, God, I want to honor you in every way, and then begins to take steps. And when you begin to take those steps, the Bible says that God is like a father. He delights in those steps, and he begins to order your path. But here's the deal. The next promise is, though they stumble, which means you're going to stumble. So that if you think that somehow you can't achieve what God wants for you as a marriage because you're not healthy enough, no, healthy people are those who are determined to follow God and accept their stumbles, but trust the Lord to keep them from falling flat on their face. And I hope that's hope for you tonight, whether that's for your life and your relationships and friendships, because I think we could even take some of these to family. I mean, what does it mean to be on the same team with your family? What does it mean to be on the same team with your coworkers? How can you serve them? How can you have 100% mindset in serving those around you? That's another thing we could develop. And not to mention the fact of what does it mean for my life to reflect God's glory, right? So these are huge things, but that's a hope for you. God has called you, single, married, whatever. God has called you, and He will grace you with His power to demonstrate His love to the world around you. I'm so excited that you were with us tonight. I hope you got something from this. Definitely, you can still share this. Matter of fact, when this is over, you can go to our YouTube page and find this and share this with your friends. Don't forget, certainly send us some feedback. If you want to send an email to info@klcc.us, let us know your questions, your comments, so that we can minister to you. But with that said, we're so glad you joined with us. Bob, Karen, thank you so much for your time. God bless you, and hopefully we get to do this again sometime.
Great. That was great, Mike. Thanks so much.
Have a great night.
Thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed our presentation. Would you consider partnering with us to share the hope of God and the love of Jesus by giving? You can give your gift at klcc.us/give. Thank you for your generosity. Also, we would love to connect with you, so please follow, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms, as well as downloading our app on both the Apple and Google Play stores. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.